This morning, we hear from a strong Republican voice who's out to silence a Democrat and replace him in Congress. Nicole Malliotakis has already left a mark in Albany.
A lot of bad bills have come through under one-party rule.
Plus, more Democrats joining the drive for impeachment, while the president declares it a coup and now is calling on another foreign country to investigate a political rival.
China should start an investigation into the Bidens.
Now from 42nd and 2nd, this is New York's very own Pix 11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
Good morning. As candidates line up and they debate for next year's presidential race, there are a number of congressional battles brewing in our own backyard. One garnering great interest is on Staten Island, where Democrat Max Rose is facing a challenge by Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis. She made an unsuccessful bid for mayor in 2017, yet garnering 67% of the vote in a seven-way race. She's now seen as a rising star in the state Republican Party. One report suggesting the race is a toss-up, while Republicans see it as one of their best opportunities to flip a Democratic-held seat. Good to have you back on Pix 11 News Close-Up.
Great to see you, Marvin.
While the Democrats are lining up and the numbers are increasing in support of impeachment, you're remaining loyal to the president and you are opposed to the impeachment. Why?
Well, because I just think it's nonsense. I think this is a continued witch hunt. We have seen, since this new socialist squad has taken office, we've seen attempt after attempt after attempt to take down our president without any evidence, without any facts. And quite frankly, it's quite obvious that this is a witch hunt just because they don't like this president. They don't want to work with him. You
don't feel any of the evidence is building with one revelation after another? Now the president calling for China to launch an investigation against his political rival?
Well, I think that he's raising questions about the Biden's situation in these various countries and the money that his son has made from in these countries. I think that again, I think this is only a witch hunt on behalf of a growing group of socialists who do not want our president in office, not for any good reason, only because they disagree with his politics.
Now, you've been very outspoken, quite vocal in the last couple of days against the Democrat you're running against. It's really a Republican, really predominantly Republican district, Staten Island and parts of Brooklyn. And the other day, Democrat Max Rose, he changed his position. He had been standing in opposition to impeachment, and now he favors impeachment, and you have been extremely vocal about that.
Well, I mean, Max Rose, since the day he has gotten into office, has flip-flopped on every controversial issue out there. Whether it was Ilhan Omar denouncing her initially, then by the end of the day, he was calling her a friend with whom he shares values, refuses to say that she should be removed from the Foreign Affairs Committee, which I have because of her anti-American, anti-Israel, and her offensive comments about 9/11. He's been all over the place on these issues. And when it comes to impeachment, he was against impeachment just a couple of weeks ago. And as soon as a socialist candidate jumped into the race to primary him, he flipped, he caved to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and he sided now in saying that he fully supports moving forward with impeachment when nothing has changed in that period of time.
He says he was waiting for more evidence to come through, and he felt that there was enough evidence there to support that, but you're saying this was a political move more than
it was less than 24 hours after someone who jumped into the race from the left of him that he caved. I mean, he basically has shown his true colors, and the problem with him is that he moved here from Park Slope just a year before the election to run for office. He is literally a Park Slope liberal, just like Bill de Blasio, who moved to the district to run. He's out of sync. He is not representing the views of the majority of the people of Staten Island and Brooklyn. Look, I've been representing this district for 9 years in the New York State Assembly. I know the views of the community, and I can tell you the majority of the people in this district do not support these endless investigations. Why? Because they do nothing to lower our taxes, they do nothing to improve our commute, they do nothing to secure our borders. They want a Congress who's going to work with the president, who, by the way, won this district by double digits in 2016.
Well, he did, if I heard correctly, he did get a large number of applause when he did say he supported impeachment.
Yeah, because the room was stacked. The room was stacked. It wasn't a general crowd.
It was a town hall meeting.
It was a town hall meeting, but it was stacked with supporters of his. And the reason why he caved at that town hall meeting was because he knew he was going to be put under pressure having this town hall that night, and he had to say something to satisfy his left base. And that is exactly what occurred here. And unfortunately, the people of this district deserve someone who's actually going to stand up for them and not cave one way or the other.
Okay, this is a district that is known to be a swing district. What makes you so optimistic you could defeat him?
Well, look, I've been representing this district for 9 years. We've had many successes in this district together, whether it be rebuilding after Hurricane Sandy. I've helped hundreds of families get back in their homes following that tragedy, whether it be restoring bus service in the district. I was able to preserve funding for our senior centers. There have been a lot of successes that we've had together as a community, and I know that my constituents appreciate the work I've been doing. But aside from that, from a political perspective, I can tell you that this is a district which, by the way, as you mentioned earlier in the show, I did get nearly 70% of the vote when I ran against Bill de Blasio. They appreciate the fight that I've been fighting on their behalf, and I think that the people of this city, hundreds and thousands of people who do not agree with the views of Bill de Blasio and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jerry Nadler, want someone who's going to be going to Washington and fighting for them, providing that alternative perspective. And the current congressman has showed that, with a little pressure, he will cave to the left immediately, and he's voting 97% of the time with Nancy Pelosi.
How does the third candidate who entered this race fit into this equation? Richard Olivia Marius, who was really supporting Max Rose in the past election, he's now become a candidate. How does he fit into this?
Well, I think between he and I, we're actually able to expose Max's true colors, and his announcement the other night in support of impeachment just shows exactly where he stands. And having more candidates in the race is, I think, a good thing. It's a healthy thing. People should be able to have a choice. But at the end of the day, I think, I'm presenting the views I believe that are most in sync with the people of this district. They know the work I've done for them, and I'm going to go to Washington and fight for them and be their voice.
On that note, let's take a break, and when we come back, let's talk about some of the issues.
Okay,
we'll be right
great.
back. Stay with us as 11 News Close-Up continues.
You're watching New York's very own Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Back now with Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis, who is also a candidate for Congress from the 11th Congressional District. You have, let's talk about some of the issues. You have been very outspoken about one bill that's still before Congress that would give illegal immigrants the right to vote in U.S. elections.
Well, there's a bill both in Albany and Washington that would allow for automatic voter registration. The problem comes in when New York passed a driver's license bill that would provide illegal immigrants with driver's licenses. The New York State Association of County Clerks is suing to stop that because they're saying they cannot verify those records. But what was problematic subsequent to that was a bill that came on the last day of session that would have automatically registered everyone who applied for a driver's license to vote, giving them the opt-out only if they don't qualify, which means that the burden was put on the individual to say, I do not qualify. If someone came, for example, with a foreign document and applied for a driver's license, that application would be forwarded to Board of Elections regardless of whether they used a foreign document or a U.S. document to apply.
And it would be up to that individual to say that they're not a U.S. citizen.
It was up to that individual to have to check off a box and say that they do not qualify, which, obviously could lead to many errors occurring. And so we spoke out against this bill. We exposed the bill. The bill was extremely flawed, was pulled from the agenda at the 11th hour. Washington passed a similar bill that would have allowed for automatic voter registration.
It's passed the House, but it hasn't gone through the Senate.
Exactly. But this is about preserving the integrity of our elections, making sure only those eligible citizens can vote, and not accidentally register individuals who are non-citizens.
Let's talk about another issue. One of the biggest crises in the city, you're dealing with housing, you're dealing with a homelessness. Homeless crisis. The mayor said this was going to be his priority when he first took office, yet we have the homeless all over. You're up in Albany. What can the state legislature do to help alleviate this problem? And further, if you're in Congress, what could you do there?
Well, what we can do is provide the funding necessary for supportive housing, for affordable housing. We've done a lot of things in Albany. I think what's really the problem is at the city level, the mayor has actually turned homelessness into a business, entering into multi-million-dollar contracts with developers developers to provide units to the homeless, which come out to roughly $4,000 or $5,000 a month. You could pay somebody's mortgage for that amount. So the idea is that the mayor's emphasis is on creating more shelters, where it should really be on creating more affordable housing and more supportive housing that addresses the underlying needs of the individuals who are homeless. We know that there's a mental health issue here in New York City, which the mayor has spent, his wife running the Thrive NYC program has wasted millions.
But isn't there more that could be done by the state legislature, the state senate, and the assembly? That more, this is a crisis. We hear a lot of talk from politicians and the mayor and others that they're going to resolve this situation, but yet it lingers.
I think the main issue and the problem is the policies that are at the city level that have been rolled back. All the things that Mayor Giuliani and Mayor Bloomberg had put in place to reduce homelessness in our New York City streets have been eliminated by the mayor. He's eliminating the welfare to work programs. There are people who are waiting in demand for training opportunities, for educational opportunities to get back on their feet. He's not addressing the mental health issue. I think that's a major part of it. So from the state's perspective, we provide programs that provide funding, but if the mayor's not going to be implementing those proper things here in New York City, then we're not going to see results. And I think that, again, he's moving more towards the idea of building shelter system. I've said when I ran for mayor that what we need to do is get people out of the shelter system and transition them. And that goes with training. That's the welfare to work programs. That's supportive housing that provides individuals with shelter, but also addresses their underlying issues so they can make improvements to themselves and be self-sufficient. And those are things that I think that it's just a general different view that we have of how New York City should operate.
But also dealing with housing, you're dealing with the crisis as well in housing. You've got public housing, NYCHA, deplorable conditions people are living under. We have a federal monitor in there now. But Albany should be doing more. Why is it not? Well,
Albany is the one that put a monitor in the NYCHA facility. Albany has actually put a tremendous amount of resources into NYCHA. It's how the city is spending the money. You know, there's a trickle-down approach. Funding comes from the federal government to the state, down to the city. At the end of the day, it is local government's responsibility to spend those resources wisely. We've put a monitor in Albany. I mean, there's only so much that the federal government and the city can do. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for Congress in a way, because, you know, a lot of these issues that I brought up in the mayor's race, there is some federal oversight, and we can put pressure onto the city to do the right thing.
Now, last legislature session ended in June, and something that was on the agenda but was not voted on is the legalization of recreational marijuana. Where do you stand on that?
Well, look, I'm opposed to that bill. I don't think it's the direction we should be moving in our city. We have a tremendous drug crisis, but not just the drug crisis is one issue that we need to resolve. And on the state level, we've done a lot to expand insurance coverage for individuals who are suffering and need treatment. But what I will say is that these smaller type of crimes that the mayor is trying to legalize and our governor is trying to legalize, marijuana, for example, is going. I mean, what's going to happen if somebody smokes marijuana and gets behind the wheel and drives? I think that one of the issues we have right now is a pilot program on Staten Island where the city doesn't want the police to actually take reports for accidents. What's going to happen then if we have people smoking under the influence? There's going to be more accidents. We're not going to have proper records of that. I think it's very dangerous. I think it's a public safety issue.
If you win this election, what would be your first priority in Congress?
Well, I think for me, there are local issues, and for the most important local issue in my district is the development of the seawall to protect, which actually runs the whole course of my district, protects the individuals who are suffering from Hurricane Sandy. That to me is number one priority. It's already been delayed. I put $151 million in state funding with my state delegation from Staten Island for the state portion of that wall. I want to see it done to protect my constituents. Flood insurance rates will drop 50%. That to me is the number one priority, but certainly there's a whole slew of things, and I see we're running out of time, and I won't be able to talk all of that. But go to my website, NicoleForNY.com.
And I'm sure you'll be back here before the election next year, and we'll have Congressman Max Rose will be on the program as well, so we'll be hearing more on this debate. Thank you, Nicole Malliotakis, the Assemblywoman now running for Congress from the 11th Congressional District. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the impeachment proceedings. Stay with us.
watching New York's very own Pix 11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
The House of Representatives began questioning witnesses this week, moving forward with its impeachment inquiry against President Trump, who has characterized the proceedings not as impeachment, but a coup. He continued efforts to discredit the whistleblower. He added fuel to the fire by asking China to investigate a political rival, Joe Biden and his son. American sentiment toward impeachment proceedings, they're reflected in the latest poll, which shows 45% of those questioned favor it, 38% are against impeachment, and interesting to note, among those numbers, 30% of those responding were Republicans who favor it. Taking a look at the latest developments with us now is political strategist Hank Sheinkopf and Alain Sanders. He's a professor of political science at St. Peter's University in Jersey City and a former senior reporter at Time magazine. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. Any developments you saw this week that made the case for impeachment stronger or weaker?
Well, the results of the interview with Ambassador Volker revealed some information which suggests that there may have been a quid pro quo. Some of the information that's come out suggests that the president wanted the president of Ukraine, our president wanted the president of Ukraine to investigate Biden, and in exchange, the president would reward the president of Ukraine with a joint appearance. We'll have to see whether that is borne out, but certainly that suggests a quid pro quo.
The most significant development is the change in public opinion polling numbers. Marginal Republican districts, if those numbers indicate that they're more in favor of impeachment now than they were a week ago, should tell the tale. This will be about Republicans, not Democrats. Republicans will determine, as they did with Nixon, whether this comes to some conclusion.
It's interesting. While the poll numbers are favoring impeachment, the popularity numbers in the latest poll shows 49% approval rating. They've gone up.
Well, everything is very volatile. And of course, the Democrats are betting that as more information comes out, the polls will change and the electoral environment will change, not just for the president, but for Republicans who have been unusually silent these past few days. They've tried all kinds of diversionary tactics, talking about everything except the central question: did the president seek to involve a foreign state in our electoral system?
Did the Democrats lose a little leverage this week when it was revealed that the situation of withholding military aid to Ukraine was not revealed until a month after that July 25th conversation between the president of Ukraine and Trump?
Listen, did they lose leverage? It's not important. The only thing that's important, truly, is what else we learn. That's already buried in the past. This is a fast-moving story, and that's why the poll numbers move. The more the poll, more information that's revealed that shows the president acted in any way against the interests of the country, okay, the more those numbers are going to move.
What do you make of this thing now? He's calling on China to investigate the Bidens.
Well, exactly. That confirms the fact that the president puts his political interest ahead of the national interest. And so it reconfirms that. But there's another side to it. The president likes to sort of move on quickly and add fuel to the fire so that the debate and the arguments and the political discussion moves on. For the Democrats, the task is to stay on message and to point out that the president is asking a foreign state to interfere in our electoral system.
And Democrats are notoriously impossible and capable of doing that, and that's why the action moved to Schiff and away from Nadler. There was no control of the discussion.
Right.
Now, it also came out this week that some of the whistleblowers' claims are not borne out in the actual transcript. What do you make of that?
Well, we need more evidence. I mean, the whistleblower got his information wherever he got his information from people who were involved in the decision-making, presumably. But in any story, there are always side stories. There are always added details. What you have to focus on in any investigation is the central point. Did the president ask a foreign state to intervene? Now, there may be a quid pro quo, but it seems to me that that's not essential. The essential matter is the president putting the national interest behind his own political interests? The framers were very careful about that. They worried deeply about an executive who would put his political interest ahead of the country's interest.
The hero of the Nixon investigation was then Senator Howard Baker, who said, what did the president know and when did he know it? The question here will be, when did the people who were impacted, the ambassadors and the others and the foreign heads of state, know they were being asked to do something that violated American law? When? And who was the person that started that process? If it's the President of the United States and that timing fits, he has real trouble.
Has Adam Schiff, the congressman who heads the Intelligence Committee, has he lost some credibility because he deviated from that script and he was doing somewhat of a parody and not sticking to it? That's cost him. The president's been attacking him.
Yeah, you know what? The best thing is to stay on the script and don't be a wise guy. That's what the Democrats have to learn. The Republicans are perfect at it. They know how to keep together. Democrats are like herding cats.
Right, and the information and the evidence and the debate will move on. So this certainly is not something that helps him today, but whether it has a long-term impact, not quite clear.
Now, coming out and saying China should investigate the Biden, this an effort by the president to deflect attention from the Ukraine situation?
Well, it's an effort to anesthetize America, to stupefy Americans, and to make what is really a gross divergence of norms and a gross danger to the national interest, to make it seem routine, to make it seem like this is normal. And so that's a problem. And again, the Democrats have to stay on message and point out that seeking foreign interference in our elections is dangerous to the national interest of the country. It was first pointed out by George Washington in his farewell message, and he was very careful to point out, don't get entangled in foreign affairs, particularly with foreign governments, I should say, and particularly as it pertains to our electoral system.
Now, while Ukraine is saying they found no wrongdoing on the part of the Bidens, the former prosecutor, I just read this morning, the former prosecutor in Ukraine said that he was approached by Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, to back off on the investigation. I mean, you're getting stories from all sides. I mean, that's the whole course of this whole investigation.
That's the course of finding truth. We don't know what truth is yet. We know that something happened. We need to know what the sequence is. And the sequence is crazy. And the president's trying to keep it that way because the more insanity he brings to the table, i.e. the more chaos he creates, the lower the probabilities are that Americans who vote will be able to figure this out.
Now, right now, there are 226 Democrats who are support impeachment. That's 8 more than you need, right? You need a 218 for impeachment. And these proceedings, some anticipate this will be right by the end of by Thanksgiving?
Well, I think it depends on Nancy Pelosi, how she wants to do it. Does she want to fast track it or does she want to slow track it? And I think that will be a political strategy that she still has to figure out, and it will depend on the evidence as she assesses it.
Now, this week, did you find it highly unusual that the Inspector General of the State Department called in senior staff members from Congress to call for a briefing on some documents?
Very unusual that anybody from the executive branch would move without the president's direct approval, and obviously he didn't approve that. That's quite clear.
Right, and what you can get from that is obviously there's great discomfort within the executive branch about some of the things that went on in that branch, and so I think that's noteworthy to consider.
Now, you're talking about involvement of the Secretary of State, and you're also talking about Pompeo, and you're talking about the involvement of the Attorney General Barr. Where do you see this going at this point?
Where do I see it going? If it works out badly, it'll be John. You know the.
Do you see it going its full course towards impeachment proceedings?
Here's the issue: if there's enough evidence in the House of Representatives, it will force Mitch McConnell's hand in the Senate with the trial and the threat of trial might be sufficient for the president to resign, which would be normal. But if he brings it to a trial and he appears, which is more likely with this guy, we'll see absolute. It'll be very difficult.
I have to ask you one quick political question before we leave this.
Sure.
I mean, we've been seeing a lot of Hillary Clinton this week, and there's muttering about that she's looking for a comeback. What do you think?
I don't think so. I think her political career is over. Her talk show career is not, but her political career, I think, is over.
To help the Democrats, it would be best, and I'm a fan of hers, to not appear so much.
And the front runner right now, Elizabeth Warren?
Warren.
Is there a dark horse out there we haven't seen yet?
No. She's the one. And by the way, if you look at the present political system, Trump is the populist response on the deep right, and Elizabeth Warren, frankly, may be the very deep response to the deep populist left.
There are people out there saying this whole impeachment proceeding is going to favor Trump, that he's going to be reelected in 2020.
Much too early to know. Much too early to know.
Don't hock the house yet.
In politics, you never know. Stay tuned. Alain Sanders, Hank Sheinkopf, thank you. Always appreciate your insight. And that'll do it for our program for this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/newscloseup. Up next, Greta Van Susteren and Full Court Press. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.
Wide shot?
That was
That's pretty good, I thought. I mean, you know.